Welcome back to Utah Studies. Today we're doing Chapter 9. Let's get into it. Okay, so Chapter 9, one of the terms you need to know is self-sufficient economy. So what does it mean to be self-sufficient? It means you don't have to rely on anybody else. Why do you think Brigham Young would want a self-sufficient economy? We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about communication. Okay, um, I'm thinking mountain men time, maybe to send a letter, if you even could send it, would take 8 months to go round trip, I guess, to New York and back. 8 months, maybe a year, something like that. Many, many months, okay? Then you get the Pony Express. It just takes many days or even many weeks. And then you're going to get the telegraph. So we're seeing the communication speeding up here in Utah. Let's keep going. So what does self-sufficient economy mean? It means you can make everything right here in Utah. Why would Brigham Young want that? Remember, we just had the Utah War. Okay, so there's two kind of themes running through these chapters. One is conflict and cooperation. The Native Americans and the Mormon pioneers. Sometimes they cooperate and they make each other better. Sometimes they're in conflict. Fair enough? Okay. There's another thing going on, and that is the United States looks at Utah like, we don't trust you. And Utah looks back at the United States, we don't know about you. Later, they're going to give each other a big hug. Utah is going to be a valuable member of the Union. So that's coming up soon. All right. So here we go. Give some examples of conflict. Okay, Walker War, where the people were killed, Native Americans were killed over some flour and some fish. Give an example of cooperation. Jacob Hamlin, learning Ute and Paiute languages and settling disputes. Okay, conflict and cooperation. Okay, all I want you to know from Huntsville is this. Bam. The settlers agreed to pay an annual tax of cattle, flour, and vegetables to the Native Americans. This is an example of cooperation. Okay? Little Soldiers in your book on page 149, you can read about and see the picture there. Unfortunately, he dies from a stray bullet. He was involved in Huntsville there. Okay, so the cotton mission. Again, what's this an example of? You could have bought cotton from the United States, but instead you want to make cotton yourself. Okay, this is an example of a self-sufficient economy. This is Brigham Young wanting to make sure that Utah has everything it needs right here in Utah. This is St. George area, something like that. Richfield, why? Because the field is rich, the soil is good, right? Okay, interesting little tidbit. Okay, if you read page 163, you'll see that it's a hard life. Why? In the north, you could take a guess. Cold snow. In the south, not a lot of water. What was 2 to 3 feet deep? The crickets. Okay, the crickets. Now look, I'm not asking you to memorize all these facts. What I want you to understand is imagine you were going on a camping trip and that was it. You weren't coming back. You only had the supplies you brought. Okay, Utah is very dry, and so water management would be at the top of your list, or how do we acquire food, things like that. This is what the pioneers had to deal with. Okay, um, very difficult to survive out here sometimes. Okay, so we were talking about Stagecoach. I cut the movie out because it was kind of long, but Stagecoach. This is a test question. They want you to know what are the dangers of the Stagecoach. Floods and storms. My best example of this is Interstate 15. It was only, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. Part of it above Las Vegas got washed out in like 5 minutes. Okay, flash flood. Okay, of course, Indian attacks on the Stagecoach. If you've ever heard of the term I've got shotgun, which usually means I'm sitting next to the driver in the car. Hey, I got shotgun. That's talking about the Stagecoach, the guys that sat next to the driver with the shotgun to protect the coach. And then bridges. Who built the bridge that you drove across? Exactly. You don't know. It could just be any guy. They didn't have like a survey team and an engineer building these bridges. So you just crossed your fingers and went for it. Okay, Go Shoot War. The Indians are attacking the Stagecoach. Why? because they don't want any more settlers. Okay, they feel that there's already too much friction here in the Great Basin. You can read about the Pony Express on page 165. Please do so. Why will the Paiutes attack the Pony Express? Again, to try to resist more settlement into the Great Basin. Okay, what is the first telegraph message out of Utah? It's Brigham Young saying Utah is loyal to the Union. Okay, so tell me, what is the first telegraph message out of Utah? Brigham Young saying, this is during the Civil War, I should mention that, during the Civil War times. Brigham Young is saying Utah is loyal to the Union.
The age of instant communication was born on January 11, 1838 in Morristown. It was on that date that Samuel Morse and Alfred Vail first demonstrated the electric telegraph at Vail's Speedwell Iron Works. The telegraph was nothing short of a revolution, enabling messages to be sent much faster than previous means, which relied on messengers riding on horseback. Rapid communication served as the foundation for the nation's economic expansion in the 19th century. New Jersey was at the center of the new telecommunications network, linking the major cities along the East Coast. The electric telegraph went on to play a key role in developing New Jersey's reputation for innovation. Thomas Edison's universal stock ticker and his quadruplex telegraph, enabling 4 messages to be sent on a single wire, incorporated the new technology. Edison's successes with these inventions provided him the means to build his renowned Menlo Park Research Facility, and it all started with the dots and dashes of the electric telegraph.
Okay, so now there's going to be more turmoil in the territory. Do you remember what Camp Floyd was, or what Camp Floyd was about? Okay, so after the Utah War, the military is now in Utah at Camp Floyd. Patrick Connor is going to be sent in to protect some of the stations, the stagecoach and the telegraph lines from Indian attack, and he's going to end up becoming the father of Utah mining. Okay, so here we're talking more about conflict than we are cooperation. Okay, how did he view the Native Americans and the Mormons? Patrick Connor pretty much hated them both. Okay, who was Black Hawk and what did he fight for? Also, let's talk about mining and how that's going to impact Utah. So I just mentioned this. Patrick Connor comes to protect the mail, to protect infrastructure, we'll say, and he starts mining. Brigham Young had told the pioneers not worry about mining, worry more about food, and so now you have a non-Mormon becoming the father of Utah mining. Had Brigham Young said, hey, our goal is to get the gold and silver, you could very well say Brigham Young would have been the father of Utah mining. So that's how that worked out. Okay, who's the father of Utah mining? 1, 2, 3. There you go, Patrick Connor. You got it. Okay, so check this out. The Utes originally occupy most of Utah, or at least 45%, a vast amount of land. And then by 1870, that's down to 9%, and it's not even the quality land. So they have, in a lot of ways, been backed into a corner. They have no choice but to fight back if they want to survive. So the Bear River Massacre. Here's Patrick Connor. He doesn't respect the LDS people. He doesn't respect the Native Americans, and he has a take no prisoner attitude. Okay. So the travelers are on this trail. Imagine you're out literally in the middle of nowhere for back then, and it's very dark. There's no street lights. There's no electricity. You could be easily frightened. And so they kill a Shoshone who turned out not to, as history says, was a friendly. And it causes, big problems. And the Shoshone come back, and then Patrick Connor just massacres people. It's terrible.
Our tribe is indigenous to northern Utah, southern Idaho. The Mormon settlers had moved up into here with their cattle and their fences, and so we no longer could just travel the way we traveled to find game and wild seeds and berries. We were all competing for the same resources now. The game was gone, the seeds were gone. Our way of life was drastically diminishing. We had three options: beg for food, which they did; starve, which they did; or steal, which certainly they did. They'd go take a cow every now and then because we had no concept of personal property. If people had excess, they always shared with the community. If you're starving, you go take what you need. Word started getting back to Salt Lake. We're having a problem with the natives here. And so when those letters went to the army that was stationed above Salt Lake, Colonel Connor said, well, we came to fight and let's go take care of the problem. The soldiers came and down the bluff right over here and come off the bluff. Sagwitch, being an early riser, got up as usual on the morning of January 29th and saw a mist up on the bluff. And he wondered what it was, but as it got closer, the mist moved, and it was the horse's breath as they were advancing. And pretty soon he realized what was happening. The soldiers from Camp Douglas had arrived. Right here, we're just over the massacre site itself. Most of the lodges were in the ravine. The soldiers at the end of the day flanked the tribe and came around from behind on two different paths and pushed our people down to the river, which was located down there where most of the bigger trees are located. And just pinched them down to the river. Most of our people were massacred down in that area. But none of the bodies were buried. Most of our people that were massacred, bodies still lay just below us here in this area. He wanted to completely annihilate our band. And he did a really good job. As horrific of an event as it was, and it was really horrific to the people that lived through it, it was almost a blessing. It changed the way our tribe is today. After the massacre, the government tried to get us to move to a reservation. Right prior to that, all the survivors were baptized into the Mormon Church. One mass baptism, one morning. The government came and said, we're moving you to Pocatello. And Brigham Young said, you know what, they're Mormons now. You're not moving them anywhere. We're going to teach them to farm. We're going to teach them to be members of society. So from that point on, we assimilated into culture. You can say that's a blessing or not a blessing. If you go to a reservation today, alcoholism, drug abuse, unemployment, and suicide run 10 times the national average. It's a blessing in the respect that we're not on a reservation today.
All right, so Black Hawk War, here we go. Brigham Young gets local leaders to sign the treaty, and everything's gonna be okay, right? They've come together, they've created compromise, they've signed the treaty, but Congress rejects it. Okay, the Native Americans don't necessarily understand. They're dealing with Brigham Young. They feel like they're dealing with the chief, okay, the top political officer, and they don't necessarily understand that he can be overruled by Washington. They see this as broken promises and they start fighting, okay? And people die on both sides. And so that's the Black Hawk War on page 171. I highly suggest you read about it. But it's again an example of conflict in the territory, okay? Limited resources, more people. This is causing friction. Okay, mining. Here we go. It's not that there wasn't mining by the pioneers, but it was to make stuff they need. So, for example, in here, Iron County, okay, you need iron. The mining wasn't to get rich, okay, it was to be self-sufficient. Okay, so it's not that they never found gold, they did. But they were discouraged from prospecting. Work on building the settlement, making the food. Don't focus on getting rich, okay? You can't eat gold. That was sort of the attitude of Brigham Young. So now the soldiers that were coming in from the outside, they want to get rich, okay? So that's why Patrick Conner becomes the father of Utah mining, and they'll be starting the silver mines, etc. Okay, and it makes sense that, by the way, I've seen Utah's first non-Mormon town. I've seen it listed as a number of different towns, but I think I'm pretty sure it was in your book where it said Stockton because of the smelter. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so let's talk about mining being dangerous work. Okay, so if you've never heard this, the miners would stick a canary in a cage and then take it with them down in the mine, and that's how you would tell if the air was poisonous or if it was dangerous. If the canary died, it meant you need to run out. And so canary in the coal mine is now an expression, as a signal of danger.
The one thing we're watching are the European markets as a potential canary in the coal mine.
Okay, so there was an example of them saying canary in the coal mine. Okay, Zion's Cooperative Mercantile Institution promotes economic growth. Okay, the pioneers are trading with each other and making themselves economically stronger. Let's look about the ZCMI.
Behind me is the cast iron facade of the Zion's Cooperative Mercantile Institution. It came about when Brigham Young noticed there was price gouging for basic commodities out here in the early pioneer territory. The reason is those basic commodities needed to come from the east across the plains, hauled by ox team from Missouri. Local Salt Lake merchants took advantage of that situation and charged exorbitant prices for basic commodities. For example, a sack of sugar cost $100, and remember, that's 100 pioneer dollars. Brigham Young's answer to that situation was to encourage the saints to form and organize cooperatives. The saints benefited not only from the lower prices, but also they had an outlet where they could sell their goods. Now, the original building on Main Street that's located behind the facade was constructed in 3 sections between 1876 and 1901. Now, during the more than 100 years that have passed since that time, there's been various wings added, and the original building the cooperative expanded, and it also modernized. They included electricity and put in cash registers, elevators. Earlier they had coal oil lamps. And they used to have these big black kettles where they'd put all the money that came in, and then periodically store clerks would come by, gather up the black kettles, take them to the office where the money would be counted. In 1972, the original building was raised to make room for a new ZCMI building, but the old facade was preserved, and the Main Street entrance became part of what is known as the ZCMI Center Mall, one of the largest covered shopping malls in the country. In the year 2000, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints sold all of its ZCMI holdings to the May department store chain, Meyer and Frank. That facade is a beautiful historic landmark and a reminder of the ingenuity of early settlers in Utah.
Ownership matters. It gives people a say in the things they care about. Being an owner in a business, for example, gives people motivation and a stake in its success. But over the last 30 years, the number of people who have control over the businesses that shape our lives has become smaller, not larger. It's no surprise that when you ask them, people say they have no influence in their workplace, over businesses, and over the economy as a whole. Cooperatives, however, offer a solution. From the outside, they may look like any other business, but inside they are very different. They're owned and controlled together by the people closest to the business: employees, customers, residents, suppliers, not distant shareholders. They have an equal say in how the business is run, and they even decide what to do with the profits. And cooperatives work. There are nearly 7,000 independent co-ops in the UK. They're found in every
Okay, so the cooperative is designed to promote economic growth and trade here in the territory. And that is it for Chapter 9. See you back here real soon. Take care.